After 11 days here in St. Augustine, we are on our way south again. Over the next few days, we are headed for Vero Beach, which is a nice stopping spot. We have a couple more little projects to knock off before we keep going, and that is the place we are going to finish them. We think we'll be there a couple days, not too long. This section from St. Augustine to Vero Beach is relatively easy. There's not a lot in the way of shoaling in any part south of St. Augustine on the ICW. Other boaters are the #1 concern in Florida. The waterways here are extremely busy. There are a lot of like concrete bulkheads, so there's a lot of wake that bounces around in a lot of places. So as a general rule, we choose not to travel on the weekends in Florida because that is when it is the worst, and around the holidays. So that is part of the reason that we've stayed here in St. Augustine over Christmas and New Year and through the weekend. Today is Monday. We are leaving today because it's no longer the weekend. We are still expecting a decent amount of traffic because it's so close to New Year's. This week we should see a little bit, but it is colder today and a little bit windy, so we're hoping that today won't be too bad. I'm also going to talk today at some point about Florida's no wake zones because they are a little different, and I actually really like the way they're set up. And we'll talk about those as we find them. Today, between St. Augustine and Daytona Beach, which is where we are headed for the night, there are 3 bridges that we need to open for us, all of which are on demand, easy peasy. And then there is 1 bridge that could potentially be a problem for anyone who has a higher air draft, and that is in Daytona. I will point out that as we go. We are just leaving our anchorage in Daytona Beach. Not a whole lot to write home about here in Daytona. Most of the anchorages here are just like in the lee of a bridge, essentially. There are a couple places you can bring the dogs ashore. As you can see behind me, at least I think you can, we are very officially into the heart of Florida now. A lot of Florida is these big kind of open areas that run north to south, and with very narrow channels in the middle. So it's kind of hard to make sure that you're staying in the middle of the channels. I personally really struggle with it. The markers are pretty far apart, so it's really hard to like line yourself up amongst them. And if you wander outside the channel in some areas, I mean, even 10 feet outside the channel, and you're going to be in like 4 feet of water in some places. So I have to pay especially close attention to where I am in the channel because I get distracted and I wander about, which is not great. I don't know where we're gonna end up today. We're kind of playing today by ear. So originally we were thinking Titusville. Now we're leaning towards Cocoa Beach. I don't know. It is very windy today, and it's also an extra high tide today. It's a new moon tonight.
Tides are like almost a foot and a half higher than they usually are. The bridge we just went through was only at like 62 and a half feet. Just cool. But it also means we are bucking a pretty decent current as we are headed towards Ponce de Leon Inlet at the moment. There is a decent amount of current that comes through this area and New Smyrna. And there is a bridge in New Smyrna that we need to get through, and it is restricted. It is on the hour and the half hour, which is not too bad, but the current rips. So to hold position there is not a whole lot of fun. If it's a nice warm day, there is a lot of small boat traffic and a lot of like tourist rentals and jet skis and stuff. I don't think we're gonna have an issue today. It's only like 55 degrees at the moment. The current is really ripping. We're only doing 3.8 knots at the moment, so 3.9. And I'm at full cruising RPM, which means we should be going like 6.2, 6.3.
In New Smyrna, there's a split in the channel. Going either direction will allow you to continue on the ICW. It's basically just going around an island one way or another.
Haulover Canal Bridge. This is the southbound sailing vessel Acadia on 09.
Haulover, go ahead.
Good afternoon, we're looking for an opening.
Roger, when you're close enough, I'll open standby 09 over.
Roger, Acadia standing by 09.
Keep your eyes peeled while going through Haulover Canal. There is a ton of wildlife to be spotted.
The main reason behind most of the slow speed minimum wake zones and the idle speed zones is because Florida is full of manatees, which are super cool. They are also super endangered. Florida has put a lot of protection in place to protect them, and a lot of that has to do with wake zones. As a sailboat, we basically just need to come down a little bit in the slow speed minimum wake zone, but we also need to be sure that we're keeping a very good eye out for the signs of manatees. So they basically float like just under the surface, and one of the easy ways to see them is their footprints, which are these like big, I don't know, they're almost like bubbles of flat spots that come to the surface when they flap their enormous tails to move.
Can you spot the manatee here?
They move very, very slowly. If you see one, you need to basically come all the way back to idle, try to put it into neutral if it's safe to do so, avoid them at all costs. And if you do happen to hit one, you need to report it. Last year, we actually saw a manatee in this area that had been struck and killed. And if you happen to see a struck manatee or an injured manatee, you should report that as well. I'll put a link below in the description for how you can go about reporting any issues with manatees. But it is important to be paying close attention for any signs of them so that you can avoid them as best you possibly can. And definitely pay attention to those zones. In the fall, they are typically quite a bit farther south, and then as the summer and it gets warmer, they come farther north, which is why in the northern part of Florida, date restrictions on a lot of the slow speed minimum wake zones, and usually they're from like May to September. That's because the manatees don't get that far north until the summertime because they follow the warm water, because they love warm water.
There are 4 major types of wake signs you'll see in Florida. The first is the idle speed no wake. This means you need to pull speed back as far as you can while still maintaining steerage. The FWC says that this is around 2 to 3 miles per hour. The second are slow speed minimum wake. These zones require that the vessel be settled in the water and going around 5 to 7 miles per hour. The third zones are 25-mile-an-hour zones. And they are exactly what they say. And lastly are the normal, safe operation zones. These allow boats to travel at the speed they deem safe for the conditions. There are sometimes additional instructions on signs, so be sure to read them as you go by.
Last night we stopped just south of the Addison Point Bridge, and dropped the hook in the lee of the bridge. We're already underway this morning, getting an early start, so we're going to make it hopefully all the way to Vero Beach today. And hopefully they got a mooring for us, because we heard there are already rafting boats. Today's going to be a pretty easy run. There's no depth issues at all, and all the bridges are high-rise bridges, so nothing's got to open. So should be a pretty easy day.
So we're a few miles away from Vero Beach. I called them this morning because Vero is an interesting place. It's really super convenient. It's very cruiser friendly, but there's one little quirk, and that is that you cannot make a reservation. In not making reservations, they also really don't turn anyone away, which means that they actually raft on their moorings. And it does appear that they are rafting right now, so we are anticipating that happening when we get there. They also, at this time, require have a mandatory pump out before you can go to your mooring. We'll have to go to the fuel dock first, and then we'll go to our mooring. So we'll go to the fuel dock, we're gonna get some fuel, get some water, get a pump out, and then we are gonna go to our mooring. Now, I asked this morning if we could raft up with our friends Jen and Elliot on Pivot, and they said no, but they didn't really give me a reason why. So we're gonna try asking in person and see how that goes. Obviously, if they say no, they say no. If we end up rafting with strangers, then it is what it is. We need to basically go to Vero Beach because it's one of the very few protected places that we can go from like wake and stuff, for Andy to do a rigging inspection, which we really need to do before we go offshore. And we also need to measure our mast height to find out if we can fit under the basically last bridge we need to get under on the ICW as we come through Miami. I'm a little stressed out about it, if I'm completely honest, and it's mostly around Aiden because he doesn't do well with other dogs a lot of times, like stranger dogs. He warms up to dogs eventually, but so if they've got a dog on the second boat, whoever we're rafted with, that could be problematic, but we'll see how it goes.
The main reason we stopped in Vero Beach was to have a protected spot for Andy to go up the mast and do a rigging inspection before we headed for the Bahamas. Everything looked great, so we were able to enjoy a few days at what we think is one of the most cruiser-friendly spots on the East Coast. Great facilities, quiet streets to walk, free public transportation, and a beautiful beach to hang out on make Vero a must-stop for us. Join us next time as we tackle the bridges of South Florida ICW.